welcome to episode 2 of Culture Talks. We are Heather and Shaila, the regional managers of Crown's Global Skills team. I am Heather, I'm based in the UK, and I oversee programmes in Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and now the Americas region.
Hello, I'm Shaila, I'm based in Hong Kong, and I oversee programmes in Asia Pacific.
Each episode of Culture Talks, different members of the Global Skills team will join us on the podcast to pull back the curtain of cultural training, bust some myths, and do this with stories and examples from our work and also our personal lives on different topics each episode. We want to showcase the impact and the scope of support that cultural training can provide. If you missed our first episode, we looked at all the requirements that cultural training can fulfil.
On today's Culture Talks, we're looking at people and busting the myth that off the shelf can offer enough to survive and thrive. Not everyone is the same. We want to look at the uniqueness of each relocation, show how culture can impact at different life stages and within people's experiences in order to give each person the tools they need. Joining us on the podcast today is Lucie, our EMEA Senior Regional Advisor.
Hello, my name is Lucie. Thank you for inviting me. I'm based in Prague. I am the regional advisor in the team, and part of my job is talking to people who relocate and, really discuss their concerns, challenges with the move, the motivation, and really reflect all of that information in customizing their programs.
Your job is so important, Lucia. You get to
and so interesting.
Yeah, and interesting. Exactly. You get to hear what you said, you get to hear what people really, really need. This first-hand information, and you share all that crucial information with our trainers so that we can really meet each person's need. And, actually this topic feels even more relevant to discuss now. We're having clients discussions around how cultural training can support mobility and their corporate well-being initiatives. This continues the trend of working more in partnership with our clients to create solutions for assignment success.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really seeing it. And, I think looking at this idea of well-being, I think kind of really underpins what we're trying to say in the podcast today. So being British, I went straight to the NHS and had a look at their definition of well-being. And so the NHS defines well-being as the state of being comfortable, healthy or happy. And so really any initiative needs to start by meeting people where they are and working from there to get them to that place of comfort. And so that's why, we talk a lot about individuals, in this podcast, in this series, we're talking about individual programs over group programs, because cultural training really needs to be a space for people to share and get comfortable with all that they really want to know, the questions they want to ask, and they might not feel okay asking in a group.
Yeah. Because I think the most important thing that we need to realize is that relocating, it's stressful. It's a stressful time for everybody, because you're basically putting your life on hold and you put yourself in a survival mode, right? So you relocate to this new country on a new job, and you just need to figure out the basic stuff, like where to sleep, how to get your stuff to the new country, where to buy groceries, all of very basic things. And actually it takes time to get back to, yourself a little bit, to just really establish the routine you like, reconnect with your hobbies, make some friends, feel comfortable at the job. That all takes time. And really just what the cultural training can do is just put that stress aside and provide time and place to just reflect on what the relocation means, where the challenges could be, and really find that kind of balance and avoid misunderstandings and, make the settling in process faster, I would say.
Yeah.
And also avoid those embarrassing situations, right? So let's look at different types of people we provide training to. The people that we work with are usually relocating with companies. So there is always this need, a corporate objective, and there's always a personal need within each training. So let's have a deep dive into the profile of a single person relocating, and what would be the typical questions and topics that would come out in for you, you know, when you're speaking to them? What do they focus on really?
Right. Well, our trainings, can really target like different aspects of the relocation, but the specific for a single person is that the motivation, it's very personal, right? So they made a decision from themselves, they move in by themselves. So that could, mean two things. First is that they really by themselves, which means that they don't have a person to share the experience with, right? To just like put that frustration, have a conversation. So it can be very like actually lonely and isolating. So that's one of the parts and one of the topics that we discussed, like how to make friends, how to establish that contact network, how to feel comfortable at work. It could be very stressful. For example, if it's a first relocation as well, it's a really stressful and challenging time, but also very excited. Most of the people who like relocate, like a single relocation, they're excited because they made this decision and they are just dealing with themselves, right? So the other part of the topics that I get is that it's actually faster for them to reconnect with their hobbies, and the main topic is really like how do I like establish myself in like in a social aspect. So how do I make friends? How do I communicate this? And it also depends like how different is the culture. So how that could be fast or slow, but that's definitely one of the main topics.
Yeah. So like just listening to you talking about that, Sia, I'm just sort of thinking about myself in my mid-20s when I moved from Taiwan to Egypt, and that real need. So this was like a personal decision. I wanted to move, so to live and experience Egypt, and I just felt so lost in how to make friends. It just felt so big, the bridge, like trying to build those social connections. I had already relocated to Taiwan before I went to Egypt, but in Taiwan there is similarities in some ways. It's kind of closer to British culture because there was a drinking culture of like going out and having a beer or having a drink, and kind of that's what you do to make friends. In Egypt you go out to a shisha cafe and have a lemon mint tea, which obviously is lovely, but there's that difference, and the props that I used to like support me in making friends weren't necessarily there. But also along with that, that change, which it can be very simple to overcome. And when you're adjusting to those new norms, the social invitations that I'd get would come kind of earlier than I would expect in the timeline of knowing someone. They would be more intimate, like inviting someone would invite me to their house rather than going out maybe to a cafe. And there was it's like a sort of friction of like not really kind of understanding what that meant. And because I didn't have cultural training, I would always be trying to anticipate, what does that mean? People would ask me if I was married, like when I met them, and that was something I was very consciously that was absent in my life. I was thinking about it, and that created a discomfort. Different levels of eye contact. People either looking really intensely at you or not at all. If you're a religious man wouldn't want to look me kind of deeply in the eye. There was just so many different parts that meant that if I could have understood that this was like normal, this friction that I was feeling was normal, that Egypt was a very relationship focused country and that they are very indirect communicators, that would have really helped, because not just in my personal life, that really came out when I was managing a team of young Egyptians. I was trying to balance being a manager, being friendly, like that's my natural kind of personality, but how much was I kind of really allowed to do that? It creates a real internal conflict for me, that I didn't have anyone to go home and talk to about it, and I didn't know how to address it. So I was surrounded by other people in the company who also had their own cultural biases, who'd built up, we relied on stereotypes. And it meant that really what ended up happening was that I avoided potential friendships and social connections, but then judged myself for that, because I've moved to Egypt. Why am I just friends with other British people or other expatriates? There's a real conflict that came from that lack of understanding of how to build the social connections.
Yeah, it's very challenging because you're really like everything that you used to, like how you used to communicate, how you used to make friends, everything is being challenged, works differently. Different, you need to do different steps to achieve things work at a different speed, all of that. And having in mind that also, people are different personalities. So not everybody is equipped to be like an expert relocating, right? So you need to manage all that. So it's a lot, yeah.
Oh, you know, this example, Heather, that you shared, it just shows why people need to have a greater need to build connections in the social as well as the workplace. You know,
Mm,
it's so important. I mean, again, it just links again to our topic of well-being. You know, it's just making sure that everybody's needs are met. So,
mm,
you know, we talk about the single profile, but let's talk about families. You know, in my part of the world, in Hong Kong and China, we're seeing a few families moving into this part of the world post-pandemic. But I know, Heather, you mentioned to me and Amir, you're further away from that in your timeline. You know,
Yeah.
it's like lockdown, pandemic restrictions are already lifted way before us. So
Right.
yeah, we're seeing more and less families coming into our part of the world. But I think what people are actually seeing is that, you know, so it's all about the business. People are really looking at the wider impact of relocation on the family. What about the
Yeah.
medical systems? You know, families are more worried about, like, how are you going to cope in that post-pandemic era? Kids at home and everything like that. It's difficult now. It's different. It's a different way. Mindsets have changed.
You're right.
yeah. Well, the families, those are like totally different conversations because, of course, like more people are involved in the decision making, more people are involved in the settling part. So definitely, you know, on the calls and on the conversations that I'm having, I'm discussing, you know, the feelings of the spouse as well. You know, if there's like partners relocating and, you know, if they're experiencing the relocation together or they're, you know, apart for you know, few months, that could happen as well. So therefore they're always, you know, in a like a different settling in kind of like mode or stage, or it's
Yeah.
so it's very different for each family, right? So you have partners and also you have families with children, and that's a different level because the main focus then it's standardly just how to support the kids. And these
Mm.
parents are trying to support their kids in a culture they don't understand. So it's really like discussions about the parenting style, how the schooling system works, how birthday parties work, like simple things, like how to support the experience that the children are having in the culture. And to
Yeah.
be honest, like children are standardly more exposed than their parents, you know, so they're
Mm.
really experiencing the culture because they are with, you know, at school. So the routine, the yearly routine, daily routine, they're experiencing more than their moms, that they're home mostly or just working, but you know, with some teams, and just, you know, the contact is bigger, right?
Mm.
And the parents, they want to, you know, manage all their feelings or frustrations or challenges. For instance, now I have a family that they're trying to support their 14-year-old child. She joined a local school. So she doesn't know the language, and the language barrier is a huge problem. Her English, it's, you know, intermediate, so she's a bit struggling, and she's 14, and that can
Mhm.
be very
Yeah.
hard
I
anywhere.
mean,
If
life
you
is difficult at
life
14,
is
let
just
alone
hard,
like,
exactly, and she's 14 in a different country, and she just like
yeah.
small things like she doesn't understand and she feels really uncomfortable during lunch break because the lunch break
Yeah.
looks different. So all of the like very, you know, it could be small topics that might be very important, and I can relate to that a lot because I relocated when I was 16. I just turned 16 when I relocated to Uruguay with my family, and shortly after, I was invited to a 16 years you know, birthday party. And I was like really like happy about it because I felt like they're trying to include me, and everybody was so excited about this party. I was like, oh, that's great, you know. And like 2 days before that, one of my classmates, she asked me like, what are you going to wear? And I was like, well, I don't know, some, you know, something. I will wear something. And she's like, oh no, you need to get like a proper dress, like a long dress. I was like, what? For a birthday party? So I asked my mom to go shopping, and we had no idea what we were shopping for. Like I tried to ask them, but like I couldn't get a clear idea about like how this is gonna look like. And thank God we actually bought we actually buy a dress because I arrived to a huge party, like a small wedding, like 200 people, and you know, birthday
Wow.
girl in a dress dancing with her dad, and like I was like so in shock because it was like 16. I was like, what is the deal? But in Uruguay, apparently, for a girl, 16 years birthday, it's a huge deal. So I was really grateful that somebody told me before, because arriving in my, skirt, and that could be, awfully awkward. So, these kind of
16,
like,
that's the end, right? That's the end.
exactly. I would need to leave the country, something like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
yes, the small topics, because when the kids, they're not feeling comfortable, or where the spouse is feeling unhappy and frustrated, that impacts everything, impacts the entire
Yeah.
assignment. So it's very essential to address the family's needs as well.
And it could be the first time that the spouse has even had a chance to think about things. It's so much going on, and they haven't even had a chance to talk about like whether they're going to be working, what they're going to do during the assignment. So the training, as like your story, if you would have that a kids training program, I'm sure that would have really helped you to understand the culture of Uruguay. But we're always making sure that these programs are adapted to every single person in that family. So it's really a customized training, right?
Yeah. I was just thinking, can you imagine you've like like you're in your new office, it's your assignment, you've got all of the kind of pressures, you're meeting your new colleagues, and you've got your 16-year-old at home who is basically like, I'm going home because I didn't have the right dress. My husband has been told that I can't work, and all of that emotional noise going on in the background. And like, your company has paid for you to go, so you have to be like meeting your business objectives. There's so much pressure.
It is. And that's why many times the spouses or the partners are actually the ones that are taking care of everything. Yeah. So because, the assignee, the task is to get the job done, to really just settle in at the new position, just understand that. But the spouses are in a new culture, many times leaving their careers and just trying to navigate and get things done. So it's very important to address their needs as well.
Yeah, because this just shows really, like, there are just so many aspects of why, people's needs are so multi-layered. Like, there's such uniqueness in each relocation, which can really impact. It's not just whether they're people who are relocating by themselves, whether they're relocating with their families, but it's also, about the culture they're relocating into. How contrasting is that culture with their home culture, or with the cultures that they are already familiar with? We've got clients, I'm talking to a client at the moment who's relocating people into Dubai from Hong Kong. And, the client is asking very specific questions about what will be in the cultural training, because there's such an anticipation of difference. So there's really kind of that part to consider as well. And then on the flip side, sometimes it's better that there is a larger perceived difference in the culture, because then you can attribute everything to culture. But perhaps if you move, like as a British person moving to the US, you might not necessarily be looking for and attributing differences to culture, because there's a lower perceived difference. But actually, in communication styles, there's a huge difference. So it's also those aspects that you've got to consider as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the key part is that these programs need to be customized, because they really need to reflect the reality of the people, of the person, of the people that are relocating. Right. So they could be focused on personal life, or supporting the kids, or supporting the spouse, or supporting the single person to establish the social contact networks, or we can like focus it on like business aspects. Quite recently I organized a strictly business focused training for a Japanese manager moving to Germany, because he was expected to manage a fully German team. So that's definitely a different communication style, different way to just organize the work, the task, giving feedback, even organizing meetings, the motivation of local people, the expectations of management. So we were just, providing that information so he can actually, build up the strategies to make a successful assignment, So making the balance and really reflecting what the needs are, it's a key element in my opinion.
And then there's the other layer. Sometimes we get assignees that are on their second or third relocation, and they often resist the training. They know it all, right? But that's, it is a question of building that awareness of, it could be that they're at a different stage in their relocation process. Maybe when they lived and worked in Africa, they were single, and then when they're moving to a different culture, say let's take Japan for example, they're moving with families. So again, they may feel that they do have experience, but different cultures, different stages of your life, the training has to be really, really focusing on that too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, kind of lastly, really thinking about how long the assignment is. That's going to have an impact as well on the relocation. If you're moving for 2 years, 2 years is really not a long period of time. So you maybe can exist in the expatriate bubble and be quite happy with that. But if you're moving longer term, you're going to have different like a deeper expectations of that relocation. So let's think about, what have we talked about today? What have we covered on today's Culture Talk? We have really looked at, like, we're seeing this increase in corporate focus on well-being and why it's so prevalent now. We've looked at the different experiences of people, and why any training needs to meet people where they are in order to get into that place of comfort. And really why cultural training can support employees and people in general. So as ever, we want to leave you, our audience, with a question to consider as you go through your day. So I'd like you to think about, what are your needs when you are considering your own well-being currently? What do you need? And what aspects would you want to consider if you went on international assignment right now? So thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of Culture Talks. Thank you so much, Lucia and Shaila. It's always a joy talking to you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you. Look forward to the next episode.
Yes, and join us again on our next episode of Culture Talks. Thank you for listening.